You've entered the boss room. This time around, we're here for a dynamic terrain object demonstration. Before I demonstrate how to use dynamic terrain objects and combinations and fun little things I like to do, I want to talk about how to get them into your encounters. There's roughly 3 ways to build encounters. You can use the step-by-step encounter builder, the quick encounter builder, which are from the rules, or you can use a tool like Stawl or Forge Steel or something else. I'm just going to talk about the ones from the book because the tools probably explain themselves and they explain it better than I would. So step by step, for either encounter method, you're going to start with kind of an idea, hopefully. At least that's how I start. You've got either a monster or a map or, something in mind that, sparks a narrative moment, because draw steel encounters are not about just draining resources. They're about, some pivotal moment or dramatic increase in tension. So, you've got your idea, and then once you've got that, you'll figure out roughly how hard you want to make it. And once you've decided that, you can look at your party, their numbers, their victories, their retainers even. And then for the step-by-step method, you'll kind of break down the numbers more specifically. So heroes are 4 plus their level being multiplied by 2. So a level 1 hero is 6 points. Encounter value. Level 2 is 8. Level 3 is 10. So on and so forth. Whereas the quick encounter builder, you just have hero slots. So 1 hero, 1 slot. 1 retainer, 1 slot. 2 victories, 1 slot. And, easy encounter or trivial, you're going to use less than the amount of slots or points you have of heroes. Standard, you'll use roughly around the same or a little more. Hard, you'll use a fair bit more than that, or, like 2 hero slots more. And then extreme, you'll use several heroes worth of points, or up to, I think 4 more hero slots. In a quick encounter builder, because I don't use quick encounter builder too often. I like that precise numbery control. Or maybe I'm just deluding myself and I just like crunching numbers when it's not necessary. Anyhow, so you've got your points or your hero slots, but at the end of spending your points, or after you've filled up your hero slots, you can spend the remainder of your points on DTOs, because you're bound to have, 3, 5, 8, maybe even more encounter value that you have not spent. Or if you're using Quick Encounter Builder, step 3 in the process is to just add a couple dynamic terrain objects. 1 to 2 for anything below hard, and 2 to 3 for anything hard and above. And I just went ahead and took a pick of the litter here that I like to use, and I'm going to show them off a bit. So first, the frozen pond. Our little scenario here is there's an Eryx that our hero Ratman the Shadow is fighting, and the Eryx has perhaps grabbed Ratman from their bite, which will launch here. Thank you, FoxRobinhood, for all the macros. And indeed, they rolled their tier 3, so 16 damage here. Ratman is grabbed. Oh, that's far too much. Minus 16. They are grabbed, but the Eryx is in their natural predation habitat here. So they've got a little idea that they're going to move along with Ratman. And they're going to send him across the lake because the Eryx has other foes to deal with. Not shown on the map here, but let's all imagine. That's what this game is about. So we will release our grab, and then the Eryx will use a knockback. So the Eryx is bigger than Ratman, so they'll have this big little versus little force movement bonus. So it'll be a push 3, minus Ratman's stability, if they had any. 1, 2, 3. And then the frozen pond will activate. use this little DTO button. Thanks again to FoxRobinhood, because they've got the whole suite of DTOs in there. And we see that the trigger is a creature moves into a pond square without shifting, which they were force moved, so yes, that counts. The effect is that the creature's movement ends, and they suffer the slippery surface ability. Now, that would have ended here, so we'll just do that. We will launch Slippery Surface. And we can note here, it has an edge if the target was force moved, and they were. So instead of this 8 here, it would have been 10. I could have input that, but I simply click through the edges and banes to launch the macro faster. So, tier 1 result here from the Frozen Pond. Ignore this explosive reaction tag. I seem to have messed up my macros. Push 1 in the direction the target was moving. So now instead of push 3, we've got push 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there is no slow here because it was only a tier 1 result, but it could have happened. Had we upgraded this Frozen Pond with Thin Ice, Ratman would not have moved at all. Well, they would have moved 1 square once they moved on the icy water without shifting, which this force movement is. And then they would suffer icy water. Once again, a tier 1 result here, so, maybe they'd slide this way or slide the other. But on higher tier results, we could see that, no matter their agility, unlike the default Frozen Pond, they would be slowed end of turn or restrained even save ends on a tier 3, which is terrifying. So that's the Frozen Pond. I like that one because it helps space out the heroes and segment a fight. And if you're running a solo, then they tend to get swarmed at a certain point. And if you don't have a way to break the heroes off of you, the battle has turned out of your favor, and you're probably going to have a bad day from then on. Moving on. I've got some lava here. Well, lava. I've, reflavored this river as a poison river. And that's simple enough to do. We just changed the damage type from fire to poison. So our Angelotl Slink here is feeling a little sneaky. And they're going to try and pull in with their 6 square long tongue Mr. Ratman. And indeed, they pull them 4. So 4 squares here. They'll fall. Notice the elevation change from 0 to -3. Make sure you have elevation changes. It does change up your maps, I promise. And poor Ratman, in addition to the strikes damage of 6, will take another 9 poison damage for a total of 15. And if their might is less than 2, which it likely is as a shadow, they'd be burning to take another 1d6 poison, in this case, at the start of each of their turns until they save on the effect. Okay, so that's that. Now, however, the Slink, similar to the Eryx, also knows about its natural habitat here, so if instead of pulling them into the river, they might pull them into this toxic plant instead. So we can launch the same attack. Pull 4, but they'll choose to just pull 2 and pull Ratman into the plant here. And that would subject Ratman to the sleep spores and might less than 1. And again, as a shadow, they might not have too much might. They might if they're a melee one. They are dazed, which is terrifying. And you could further upgrade this plant so that once you're dazed by this, they are prone. That's just part of the sleep spores. But then a carnivorous plant for 2 extra EV, if you use EV, would then start eating the hero at the start of every turn. And that causes a lot of panic from their teammates, which is fun to hear, first of all, but also changes up the fight a bit. So that's that one. The hidey hole is one that I more recently used, and I thought it would just be, a cute little bonus and help out on one turn, but it actually gave a significant durability boost to this caster. So Ratman here is on the lower ground, and our caster is got a system of hidey holes here, which you can do if you spend a little more EV on them. So upgrade to a network. But the base hidey hole here is a creature begins the encounter in a square, which is simple enough to do, or ends their turn in a square of the hidey hole. And the effect is that the creature can hide as a free triggered action. And if you're hidden, you can't be targeted by strikes. Only area abilities are going to hit you. Unless, they have features or they search for hidden creatures or something like that. So it's hard to take damage when you can't be struck. And with a really minimal extra expenditure in EV, we can make them a network and connect more hidey holes to this first hidey hole. And they could essentially move like underground or concealed from hole to hole, as long as it's a straight line distance, which this is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, move over there, shoot Ratman with both high ground from +2 and hidden for a double edge. And Ratman is really in trouble here. And then at the end of our turn, we stay in the hidey hole and we become hidden once again. Because if we had shot Ratman and not hidden again, then that would have revealed ourselves at the end of our turn. Because we would keep the benefits of hidden for the turn since we started hidden. But if we'd ended the turn here, we'd no longer be hidden. But that's what's cool about hidey holes, is that you can hide once again at the end of your turn. And it's really difficult for heroes to find you. So be careful using too many of these, but for a caster that you want to stick around and be a nuisance, it's certainly a great way to boost their durability and mobility for that matter. Moving on. Mechanisms. Mechanisms are great. They're pretty typical traps. So say, for example, that Ratman is exploring this dungeon, and obviously this spike trap starts, concealed, hidden over there. And they have noticed these columns of blades because they are not concealed. It takes extra EV to do that. We've decided not to spend that EV. But what we have decided is that this door, as Ratman carefully avoids getting next to these columns of blades, is locked. And so they are miraculously compelled to search for a way to unlock the door instead of just busting it open or lockpicking it. Perhaps it's magically sealed. And they look around the room and eventually they find this switch and they think, oh, perhaps they made a hard intuition test to find it. Or any test, frankly. And they found the switch and they think, now I have unlocked the way through the door and I can get this treasure. But they are wrong, as the switch is connected to the ram. And now this ram is going to push Ratman. So push 5 here is extra nasty with the 9 damage. This could be an entire encounter of traps. In fact, it is effectively an entire encounter of traps because each one of these columns of blades is 3 EV. The spike trap is 3. And the ram is also 3, I believe. Yes, 3. And the switch is 1. And that is a total of 19 EV. With a level 1 hero being 6, you could have a group of 3 or even 4, and this would be a standard to easy encounter. But if someone was so unfortunate as to hit the switch while standing next to the ram, and they got hit by this devastating tier 3 here, they would take, let's say Ratman was full at the beginning, 9 damage there, and they get pushed 5. So 1, getting adjacent to this column of blades, which then activates. Say it's a enchanted statue, and it spears them. 4 damage there. Ratman continues to get pushed. 2. Another Spinning Blades. For 9 damage. An A-list and 3 bleeding, which is very likely. 4. Still adjacent to the column of blades. Now you're really hurting Ratman. They're probably going through hero tokens at this point, as -10 would be in fact dead. So this is a nasty trap. And finally, 5, adjacent to another column of blades. Four damage. And of course, because their movement stopped over the spike trap, that would then launch it. Ratman falls 2 squares, and the spike trap activates. For 2 more damage. Oh, just 2. Looks like Ratman managed to eep out of there. They could shift to the closest non-trap square, but I'm not sure they'd want to move into the column of blades then again. So a grand total of 38 damage here, as Ratman is at -17 of 21. So definitely don't use this exact setup on a group of level 1s, but on a higher level group, or perhaps with less column of blades, or the column of blades further spaced away from the ram, like so. Definitely a totally viable encounter. Mechanisms are nasty. I love mechanisms, especially column of blades, because if you have a creature that can slide, you can, repeat this damage several times. But that's only if you really need to turn up the heat against your players. And at my table, that is often necessary because the players come to play, and they come to play and beat up my monsters, is how it usually goes. So I fight back in the ways that I can find. Now then, siege engines. We have catapults, which are tragically the inferior siege engine compared to trebuchets that can launch a boulder over 300 yards. But we make do. Ratman is defending this castle here. We're going to try and hold off these undead for 3 rounds. But the undead have some tricks up their sleeve. So pretend for a moment this hay bale is an exploding mill wheel. Rolling, explosives attached to it. Kind of like that orc that has the explosive strapped to them before they dive under the bridge or the gate or whatever it was in Lord of the Rings. And this thing is going to move 2 at the start of every turn. Not every round, every turn. So every enemy turn, it's going to move forward. And then heroes go, and it's going to move forward again, 2. And then enemies, and then heroes. So after whatever that was, 4 turns, it is now at the gate, and it's going to explode. Massive explosion. And it does respectable damage in a 5 burst. Very big. So unless you have, total cover here, and you've got line of effect to the massive explosion, then you're going to take some damage and potentially be burning. In addition, we've got skeleton crews, T, manning these catapults. And while the catapults can launch just a boulder and attack those on the wall with an arcing shot here, simple enough, damage and potentially push, you'd need to reload it after that. These catapults have been upgraded with Fire Me Boy, which I love the name of it. 2 EV more here, and it allows the catapult to launch allies, 1 large or smaller, and vertical push them 10. And if they would have taken fallen damage, they take none. So wouldn't you know it, these skeletons decide their zombies need to be on that wall, and they're going to use, instead of arcing shot, they will fire me boy. And this zombie, whose normal movement of 5 would get nowhere near, as they would have to get somewhere on this bridge, perhaps to that spot. All of a sudden, they are within 2 of this catapult as it vertically pushes them 10. So they can go not only across, but up. And had both squads done this, now Ratman is flanked. And in some serious trouble. Yes, catapults are great. Exploding mill wheels are great. Be careful using more than one exploding mill wheel, and especially more than one right next to each other, because you will set off a chain reaction, which is entertaining in one way, but when you have a burst 5 go off potentially twice in the same turn, that's a lot of calculating damage and push, because that's like most every creature on the map. Oh, also, when it's rolling around, it can crush people. It does some damage. But yeah, the massive explosion here. Just keep in mind that you have to resolve this damage on everyone in this 5 burst, which I'll set up here. Oops. Square. Give me a square. Bang. So you can imagine, having a lot more creatures in this 5 cube, not 5 cube, 5 burst. And then you're resolving damage for a very long time, as each one takes 5 damage, gets pushed 1, and is potentially burning. And then if this explosion sets off another exploding mill wheel, then you have to do it all over again. So don't do that. As much as I enjoy exploding mill wheels, that took a long time to resolve. And it's not like the heroes really do anything during it. They're like, yeah, we set off the exploding mill wheels. And then I'm calculating damage with myself for 10 plus minutes. Because I had a lot of creatures on this map. Because that's how hold them off objectives go. And finally, the Black Obelisk, which is one of my favorite DTOs. Because it helps protect your kind of squishy targets, whether that's a leader with not as much stamina as you'd hope for, or perhaps anglodals who are just terribly frail at 15 stamina being, I believe, the most besides their leader. So Ratman is closing in here, but it's the start of the round, which is when the Black Obelisk goes off. So, if Ratman is presence less than 2, they are slowed and weakened end of turn. And this happens in a 10 burst. So once again, a lot of effects to resolve. But I find this one more manageable and quite satisfying, frankly. Because it's end of turn instead of save ends, so you're only crippling the heroes for 1 turn, which is more manageable for them because it's end of turn. Additionally, whether you get their presence potency or not, you do push up to 2, which is handy because this Slink wants to stay away from Ratman. Yeah, and that's all the demonstrations I had here. Use dynamic terrain objects. They're fun. They can function like monsters, or they can function as an encounter by themselves. So whether you're using step-by-step encounter builder or a quick encounter builder, you'll get a feel really quickly for how much you want to upgrade your DTOs if you're using quick encounter builder, because these are like really simple monsters. They don't move and they do one thing, and that thing might take a bit of time to resolve, but I just love scattering these black obelisks or catapults or exploding mill wheels throughout different encounters, and I try to think of how to reflavor them to get them in, because I just want this silly burning exploding object coming in moving 2 squares every turn, and then it goes boom, and the heroes have to figure out some way to divert it or reflect it back or destroy it, and you create these interesting mini objectives when you use dynamic terrain objects. So thanks again for entering the boss room. This is Kabas, or Justin, and I'm out of here.